Trojan fans, welcome to the Peristyle Podcast on a Wednesday. We got to talk some USC Trojan football today, as always. Hopefully, you guys are all staying safe out there during this coronavirus quarantine. We got a lot of news about the future of college football. How viable is it to have a college football season in 2020? We heard from a lot of USC leadership, so we're going to talk about all of that today. If you have any questions or comments for the show, we love to hear from you. You can email us, podcast@uscfootball.com. If you'd rather call us, you can do that too. 424-254-9141 is the number. You can also text that number, 424-254-9141. We're going to try to dial back on the voicemails a little bit. We've been getting a lot from the same people over and over. We'll play a couple on the show today. Remember, keep them short, keep them under a minute. And you don't need to call 10 times a week. Just call once. We'll do one voicemail. If you keep leaving multiple voicemails a week, that's fine, but I can't listen to them all. So just call once. That'd be great. We'll leave a voicemail and play it on there. And we also need you to leave us some positive feedback, a 5-star review, great reviews on Apple Podcast and all the other podcasting platforms, especially Apple Podcasts. So if you have an iPhone, you have an iPad, anything Apple related, go to the podcasting app. Please leave us a 5-star review. We'd love it. If you have any questions for the show, you can put them on the 5-star review and we'll read them there. And the person that's going to read those is with me today, Keely Eure, joining us on the line via Skype. How are you, Keely?
Hello. I'm doing well. We're simulcasting today, Ryan, for the first time, so that's exciting.
Well, we're trying to simulcast for the first time. We'll see. We're recording this on video form. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then you're seeing this in the simulcast. If you're just listening to the podcast, it sounds the same, probably. But that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to put the little video element to it. We, of course, have our Tunnel Vision show, which is video only. This is kind of a way to show us what we're doing behind the scenes while we're doing the podcast. We're not exactly sure how we're going to do this yet because we have to do other things while this is going on. And now we're going to be on camera doing it. So, Keely, if you go on some long answer, I can't pretend to, pay attention and be falling asleep or whatever. So that's
right. Exactly.
I really have to pay attention now throughout the entire show. You can't be checking your phone like, I'm answering text messages and stuff while, Dan's talking. Speaking of Dan, we got Dan Weber on the line. He looks very relaxed if you can watch the show. Dan, how are you?
Doing good. Let's just hope we avoid what happened in the Supreme Court last week when they were doing this with some arguments. First time they'd ever done that. And as an attorney was making some kind of an answer to a question, toilet flushed in the background. And everyone kind of went, uh-oh, this is not going the way we planned. It was at the Supreme Court. So we'll just see. Hopefully that doesn't happen here.
No, yeah. Well, no, you can see us, so that shouldn't be happening. But yeah, if you're to take it, we're all like on computers and stuff. If you're taking your phone to the bathroom, those are funny with all the Zoom calls. And we're going to talk about some Zoom calls. We did have a call. All of us were on a call with USC Athletic Director Mike Bohn yesterday. Clay Helton was on a Zoom call. I had Brandon Sosna on with Lunch with the Trojans. So we got lots of USC leadership on video over the past few days. We'll talk about all of that. We also had Dante Williams on. If you have any questions about recruiting, I think we have some of them in there. Do want to thank our sponsor, Trader Joe's. They've been amazing to us over the past couple of years. And thanks to all the Trader Joe's workers out there. Every time I go, it's continued to be a great experience during this quarantine because it's, obviously you got to try to stay safe while you're shopping. It's just, I've never had a problem. Get in there, get what I need, get out of there. They check you out quickly. It's great. The only things now, it's funny how this has changed from, hey, we want you to bring, reusable bags. Now, don't bring reusable bags. Keep them at home. Actually, last time I brought them to Trader Joe's, they let me keep them outside, and then I just bagged the groceries myself when I got out there. But yeah, so I don't know. Everything changes. Just like remember the food pyramid growing up? Keely, you probably don't remember that. We had the 4 food groups, and they made it the food pyramid. They just change what they think is good. Egg yolks used to be bad for you, then now they're good, then they're bad. I don't know. I mean, everything changes. Yes, Keely?
Well, I was just going to say, I do remember the food pyramid, Ryan.
You do?
It was a lot of bread. But that was for a specific reason. The bread lobbyists made it a thing.
I think so. Well, it was funny. It was 4 food groups. So that was probably before your time. So bread, fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy. I think they all had one. Then they sort of but breads and grains end up being on the bottom of the pyramid. And then wait, that's too many carbs. So they got rid of that too. So yeah, they've changed it a whole bunch of times. But thanks again to Trader Joe's for helping us out over the years. And everyone, hopefully you go check them out and stay safe as you go there. All right. We got questions to get to. Like I said, there was some voicemails. It's just, I want to encourage you guys to call in the show. We like you to call in. We just, it's really hard to go through if one person leaves like 10 voicemails. So, just leave a couple. So we spotted some out there. I got some notes on some other people that left some voicemails. We'll go into that. So there's been a few of those. But topics off the top, guys, I wanted to, maybe we'll start with you, Dan. I had Brandon Sosna on last week, I guess it was, for the Lunch with a Trojan. It was right after the new video hires were made. So that wasn't really like any, too much breaking news out of that, but some good insight into what's going on in the athletic department. But we did hear from Clay Helton, and it caused a bit of a stir with they talked about a lot of contingency plans, and one of them was potentially just playing all conference games. And I know, Dan, you weren't a big fan of that, so we'll get into that in a second. And then we heard from Mike Bohn yesterday. It was I don't think it ended up being like off the record, but it was just informal. No one was like doing a story on our conversation with Mike Bohn, but I think everything was like, yeah, you could talk about what was said. We're not like quoting him or anything, but that was an interesting deal. I think we had 25 people or so, media. We had sports information people that work at USC. Mike Bohn and Brandon Sosna were both on there. Some student media, all the newspapers, the AP was there, us, the three of us. So it was kind of interesting. I don't know, Dan, any takeaways? Maybe we'll start with the Mike Bohn stuff.
Yeah, I hadn't scrolled through and saw all the lurkers on there, but because there were only, 5 or 6 of us who asked a lot of questions. Had I known Brandon Sosna was going to be on there and maybe make some kind of a negative remark about my Xavier and how many words I said, I might have said more words actually, but didn't realize Brandon was on there. But no, I think it was interesting. One of the things and I know Mike really wanted to get students' opinions, and so he really started, talking to the couple of student media people that were on there. And the thing that kind of surprises me, and we're around, the kids almost every day during the season, is how willing students are today to kind of go along with whatever they're told to do. This is what we're going to do. They're not going to question it. They're not going to ask, hey, are you sure that's the right thing to do? They're very much willing to kind of go along with authority. And I know Keely may not agree with that.
I think we can see her reaction to that. That's great. We can see her.
And that actually may not be. Time. And that may not be Keely. And it isn't Keely. But I'm always, for example, I think we went through this a little bit with football a few years ago with the whole USC was kind of in the center of the whole Title IX issues, whether, those were set up fairly and they've been changed, recently in terms of that process. And I remember trying to explain to some of the student media then that if you, set it up, so that it's just really favors one side or the other, that's just not a good process. And they would look at you and say, but that's the way they set it up. So, and you're trying to say, but it's not right. They look at you like, well, that's what they said. And so I don't know, Keely, was that surprising to you that kids kind of seem like we're going to go with whatever the school decides to do and that's good for them?
I mean, what are the real other options though? Tangible options. Protest on USC's campus? I don't get what the realistic
they're
options
not protest, but just the idea that you wouldn't, write something in the, if you're a student media person, for example, you do have some ability to respond to things that maybe you don't think are being done, properly, or you've got, obviously the Daily Trojan, and you got the Annenberg School, for goodness sakes, and you're really that's as elite as you can get and kind of the next generation of media and journalism people. And that's all, just more like kind of thinking independently for yourself as opposed to kind of, well, this is what we're supposed to do, so we'll do it.
Yeah. I didn't hire Keely because she's an independent thinker. Come on,
Which is, that's what's cool. Keely is different from, Keely figures them out for herself. I can tell you that, standing next to her all the time, that somebody's not telling her what to do. She figured it out, but I wish she weren't the exception that we kind of run into, to be honest.
I don't know. I think there's a difference between, I think just if you see how the younger people have responded to coronavirus, I think it's very like database science based. And maybe that's why they're more willing to go with the more science projected outcomes. So I don't know. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but that's all I'm going to say.
Nice. But overall, like the Mike Bohn stuff. So Brandon actually tweeted, because Brandon and Dan have a little rivalry because of the Xavier Cincinnati kind of thing, but tweeted that he thought Dan would have more words on the show. But I think we were pretty well represented there. I think we were before Dan got on, Keely and I both got called on by Tim Tesla and the moderator. And it was interesting in the beginning. Mike Bohn was just wanted to see like, hey, what are you doing? Like we all talked about what we're doing during the quarantine. Like I'm like, hey, I'm working out, I'm playing golf or whatever, and he was like, oh, you can play golf? Like, yeah, those are open. It's pretty good social distancing. So, I mean, he really just wanted to kind of get a feel for what everyone's doing. I thought it was genuine. And, I thought it was a neat gesture that, something I don't think we would have seen from the last couple of athletic directors, at least. I
think we'd go back a decade plus and would not have ever seen anything like that. I mean, not even close. Whether it was on, some kind of a media or just one-on-one or whatever, that we just didn't ever have that kind of, back and forth or accessibility from those guys, or somebody that would kind of seem like they're really interested in, well, what are you doing? Or what are you thinking? Or how's this come across to you? He certainly likes that. He likes to be that guy, and that's something he's very comfortable with. And again, it's taken some getting used to.
Yeah. And to be fair, so Lynn Swann would have never done anything like that. He never talked to us. So that would never happen. I think early on, Pat Hayden would have done something like that. He did have like an informal, like everyone come into the office and meet. I think the early in Pat's career, he might have done that and been more open. As people were more critical, as he made more decisions that were all terrible and everyone was criticizing him, he wouldn't have done it. And I don't think Mike Garrett would have touched it with a 10-foot ball. He didn't, he would do radio interviews. I mean, I think he did a much better job than those other two guys, but he was not the most, gregarious person either.
He let me in his office once. So, and I think we had a minder. I was probably been there just a couple of months, and then he started. I remember Mike started asking me questions about what was happening on the practice field and what does it look like, and you wanted to say, Mike, you can go out there. They'll let you out there. You're the AD. I mean, but that wasn't what he did. He didn't go out there, and it's been interesting. The last three ADs at USC have been, it's just been Mike Bohn couldn't be any more different. Let's just say that from the last three.
He didn't play football at USC. We know that. So, but there was some talk about his athletic. I think Greg Katz had coached or taught some of the players from like Edison High School in Orange County that went to Kansas where Mike Bohn was playing. So there was some kind of connection there. So there was it wasn't like, hey, we're going to break a bunch of news. When it came to like questions about, what's going to happen. I mean, what is he going to say? Things are on the, everything's on the table. Now that was brought up because Colin Cowherd tweeted out that he didn't think that the USC Alabama game was going to happen. Someone brought up the question to him, I think read the tweet or something similar, and Mike Bohn said that just wasn't true. He's talked with Greg Byrne, who's a former athletic director at Arizona, so he was a Pac-12 guy. Mike Bohn, was at Colorado as well. He's now the AD at Alabama, so he kind of dispelled that. Well,
I think at first Mike said, I hadn't even heard that. It was like, oh wow, I hadn't heard that, and then he, as Keely, came back with, he went out of his way to say that's not happening as far as he could say. So there was that little bit of breaking news. I thought it was. I tried to get him to talk about a little bit the whole idea of the Pac-12 being the outlier, the fact that everybody in the other Power Five conference school programs all say, well, we think the other four are going to be fairly solid. Boy, we can't be sure about the Pac-12. And that's kind of a perception that's out there. And I asked Mike about being in the Pac-12, where the perception is we're not sure we can count on you when it comes to a unified front and as far as what's going to happen with football in the fall. And Mike's answer was, well, we think we're right in there with the other four, and one of the reasons we are is we have the best. We've got the best approach to this. We've got the most people working on it, the most doctors, the most people at the various schools in terms of figuring this all out, and that just by the strength of how we're approaching this with the most manpower in terms of getting back for the fall, we're going to be fine. But when you ask him, well, what if the governors in Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon all say, hey, we're ready to go, let's go, and the governor of California says, not so fast. And Mike said, I don't know. He said, that's kind of the issue, isn't it? And I said, yeah, that's kind of the issue.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably leave it at that because we're, I don't think there was anything kind of groundbreaking from that. Mike Bohn tweeted out a picture of it afterwards, and it was cool that he just kind of embraced being able to talk to the media. So really just more of an informal thing to, chat with the media and see where everyone was. So I thought that was a good thing. We've also seen the Pac-12 do these webinars this week. So far, 9 coaches have gone. Let me pull up all the list of who has gone so far. So day 1 on Monday, it was Stanford's David Shaw, USC's Clay Helton, and Washington State's Nick Rolovich. So he's the new coach, came over from Hawaii. Yesterday, it was Colorado's Carl Durrell. Someone was saying it's UCLA's Carl Durrell. He's no longer the coach at UCLA, but he is now the coach at Colorado. Utah's Kyle Whittingham, and Washington's new coach, Jimmy Lake, former DC there, gets promoted when Chris Peterson retires. And then today, just right before this call, Arizona State's Herm Edwards, Oregon State's Jonathan Smith, and UCLA's Chip Kelly were on there. And the first day with, I think it was Peter Arbogast asked the question about, the potential of just playing a conference schedule. And Clay Helton took the first part of it saying, yeah, that's something that's definitely been talked about. And, and David Shaw followed up with it, how it would impact the playoff. I've talked about this before. If you end up just doing like a regional thing where you're only playing in conference, having an expanded playoff afterwards would be interesting, kind of an interesting aspect to it. But Dan, I know you wrote a column. You weren't super excited about this possibility. I didn't think this was something Clay Helton was advocating for or anything, but it's just something that's come up like so many other contingency plans, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird, though, that Clay Helton would be the vehicle for which it was by which it was revealed to the rest of the country that the Pac-12 was considering playing only Pac-12 games, that was even on the radar. And I'm thinking, if you're at Notre Dame or Alabama or Michigan, who's supposed to play Washington, or any of those big schools that have really big games scheduled against Pac-12 teams, and you see this hit the wire that Pac-12 might be considering only Pac-12 games on their schedule, it just seemed like a kind of a weird way to get that out into the public, that Clay Helton would be the one that would be the vehicle on the first day because that made news. Everybody in the country paid attention to that.
Yeah.
That was like, and that confirms, everybody says, see, Pac-12, they're in their own world out there. I don't know that might have been the most honest answer you could have given Pete's question, but it just seemed like you probably didn't want it to come out that way. I don't think. And the other second part of that is I didn't see an advantage into going to an all Pac-12. I mean, are you going to trade USC's 1,400-mile trip to Dallas to play Alabama for an 1,100-mile trip to Pullman to add Washington State to the schedule? Or in USC's case, if they did that, that would be a year where USC played just 5 home games, 6 road games. It would seem like it's just one more move that would isolate the Pac-12 and anybody in the Pac-12 that hopes they've got a chance at the playoffs from the rest of the country. So I didn't exactly see what would be the benefit. The only benefit I've been able to come up with for an all Pac-12 schedule would be if you decided you weren't going to be ready to start right away in September and you wanted to move it a month or two later, and you only were playing your own conference, you could do that. And because of the weather, the Pac-12 could probably do that. But other than that, I just can't come up with any benefits. And it would be costing USC a gigantic payday for the Alabama game. Yeah. And, just losing Notre Dame for 1 year, I think would be really tough. And then how do you make that up with Notre Dame in the future? Because Notre Dame's future schedules and USC's future schedules are based on every other year you get a home game from USC or Notre Dame. Well, what would happen next year? Would USC say, well, we need Notre Dame to come to USC? And Notre Dame might say, but our home schedule, we need you as our home game.
Yeah.
There just seems so many problems. I really didn't see an upside.
I get what you're saying. To me, this was more of a Pac-12 issue. Like, I'm not going to blame Clay Helton for what he said. I think, like you said, it was an honest answer. The problem is there was a couple times when the question was asked and nobody answered. There's like awkward pause, and then Clay would kind of chime in and just try to be the nice guy and answer the question. If I'm the Pac-12 and these things are going to come up, I don't want Clay Helton to answer that question because he has Notre Dame and Alabama on his schedule. Right. I want like Arizona State, who I don't think plays anybody, right? I'd have to go back and look at the schedule, but there's some Pac-12 schools that don't really have anyone on the schedule. So it's fine for them to say, yeah, we're not going to play, Portland State and blah, 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 whatever. You're Oregon and you're playing Ohio State. Like, no, I don't want, Mario Cristobal to say anything about that. You're Jimmy Lake. They got to play Michigan, so maybe that would have been a Stanford thing. I don't know. I have to look at Stanford's schedule this year, but
they've got Notre Dame.
Oh, they have Notre Dame, so that's a big one too.
Notre Dame's sitting there saying, "Wait a minute, we're going to lose maybe our best two games." I don't think Stanford might be in that category, but still, Notre Dame's looking and saying, "Oh man, this is not good."
Yeah, Keely, did you have any thoughts on the call there from?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Has Larry Scott said anything or had any state of the conference type of address yet?
They just put out a statement not very long ago in response to the Cal State. Right? The Cal State decision that they're going to shut down for the fall, and apparently the Pac-12 felt like. We better respond to that because a lot of people were writing, if the Cal State system shuts down, what does this mean for the Pac-12? So they've just released a statement that said, it doesn't mean anything. We're going to make up our own decision. But you're right. We haven't heard from Larry on the all Pac-12 schedule or anything else like that. And you don't see that much for other conferences. Even Nick Saban doesn't speak that much for the for the SEC. Dabo Swinney doesn't talk for the ACC. So that was just odd. That's all. Just another case where the Pac-12 seems to be out on their own.
Because what I said, I think last week on the pod is you would need someone like Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner, to keep everyone kind of united and together, even though the states are making different legislative demands. But to have this webinar happen and you have coaches saying different ideas and we haven't really heard a mass this is where we're going, this is what we think from Larry Scott, right. I think that's a little weird because then you get the whole situation of Clay Helton kind of making news by saying something that he's heard, which I don't think it's his fault, but shouldn't Larry be the one to step in and kind of disseminate that information prior to something like a webinar with Pac-12 coaches?
Indeed, exactly. That's kind of thing that worries you a little bit about. Will the Pac-12 be able to get its act together in terms of just dealing with the 6 governors, in Pac-12 territory and that kind of thing? You got to be pretty disciplined and you got to be pretty together. And, we're not always sure that's the case with the Pac-12.
Definitely not always together. So I think that's certainly one of the issues. But I'm curious to see where this goes. It's not. I think there was a couple of questions today. I was listening to the webinar. We had Chip Kelly and Herm Edwards, and it was weird. A couple of things kind of came up that we kind of know were not true, or you should have known the answer to. So that kind of left me a little worried too. One of the questions was, are you in favor of having the NCAA and Mark, Emmert take over and like kind of steer the ship on this one? And he came out, I think it was yesterday, and said that's not what they're going to do. We're going to default to the states and the universities. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then they also brought up the LA County thing, where the 3-month stay-at-home order, and I haven't dug into it as much, but I watched the update today. And the first part of the update, and I tweeted this out, was that they apologized for the confusion, quote, confusion that was caused yesterday. If you go and look, I guess the LA Times tweeted it out, and it might have been where a headline was deceiving a little bit, where it's saying that, LA needs to shut down for the next 3 months. I think it was something more along the lines of the next 3 months, they're not going to be able to kick people out of, landlords won't be able to evict tenants or something like that. Because when the update today, they started opening more things up. So they're still phasing in the different, slowly opening things up. So that's another headline that maybe it was sensationalized by the LA Times. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what happened there, but that made the rounds. And then even came up on the call today, and nobody said, well, that really wasn't even the case. So there's a lot of worry. The Cal State system, Chip Kelly on the call today had to say, I had to tell people, UCLA is not part of the Cal State system. It's a UC system. So there's like, I don't know, just things get out there and then it makes the run. I mean, I did like 3 radio interviews in the last 24 hours because of stuff like that getting out.
Well, another thing, I don't think anybody's commented on this. USC right now, Mike Bohn says we're going to open against Alabama and Texas. Well, there is in place in Texas for people flying in from California, a 2-week quarantine. Hello? USC going to have to fly in 2 weeks before the game? Those of us in the media, if they play the game, if that rule stays the same, we're going to have to go and be quarantined 2 weeks in Texas? Come on. So a lot of stuff has to change, but apparently that's the Texas rule right now. If you're coming from California, 2 weeks of quarantine. Hello?
Wow. That's kind of crazy. That's a long vacation, Keely. Well, we'll skip the end of fall camp and just go right into.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. But there's, some of the webinar stuff is interesting. I'll try to tweet out some stuff. I tweeted out from the Pac-12 podcast if you want to check that out as well. That's our Pac-12 one I do with David Woods over from the Bro site. But, it's some insight into what the coaches think. It was similar to what we were hearing. Otherwise, it's like, and Herm Edwards said this a couple times today. Hey, I'm a football coach. Like, I'm trying to prepare my team. Like, I don't know all this stuff was going to go. I don't know if we should go back to school or whatever. And so, because today on the call, you had Oregon State. So the state of Oregon, the governor from Oregon was the one saying, like, nobody can do anything until, like, the end of September. No gatherings. And they're like, what about Oregon, Ohio State? Like, that kind of gets lumped in there. I think Oregon State plays Oklahoma State, but that's on the road. And Arizona, their governor is like, hey, we could have pro sports here tomorrow if if anyone wants to come out and you want to have a baseball season, we can do that. And then of course UCLA in California. So it just depends on which state you're in. And they all had kind of different perspectives today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just, there are so many levels of people who will be involved in the decision making. I mean, just for USC, you've got, the city of LA, LA County, you've got California, you've got the Pac-12, you've got, the USC Board of Trustees. Trying to figure out how's that all going to come together. I don't know. I mean, will USC say, hey, whatever the Pac-12 does is good for us. We're ready to go. Will the governor of California say, yeah, we got 4 teams in the Pac-12. Whatever they say, that's going to be good for us. Or will they say, or the mayor of LA, he's been pretty strong about not opening up all the way. I don't even know, can USC open the campus in the fall without the approval of the mayor of LA? I don't know that we've got an answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a whole lot of. By the way, I did see. I mentioned it in a column today. The only plan I've seen for a football game with social distancing is the Miami Dolphins have come up with one. They've got a 65,000 seat stadium, and they've come up with 15,000 that they could go to 15,000 in their stadium and have adequate social distancing. And I was thinking, that's not that different from the Coliseum. And let's say they would decide at the Coliseum you can go with 15 or 20,000, let's say. How would you divide that up? Half students, half donors, season ticket holders, a third students, a third, whatever. I mean, there are so many decisions that would have to be made between now and whenever that it's just hard to even imagine how much has to get done.
And that's the thing. And Keely, I think we'll jump into questions after this. We've got a couple of voicemails, but we can start with some of the ones you want to do. If it's any indication, so I've played golf several times during this quarantine. Originally, Ventura County was open to play. Then Orange County opened up, and just recently LA County opened up. So now you can play anywhere. There's all kinds of new rules. The point of this is every course I've gone to has had different rules, and they're supposed to be like these universal rules. Some of them didn't have carts at all. Some of them would be, you could ride a cart, but you have to be in it by yourself. None of them the flag would come out, but some of them didn't have a flag at all. They had like a little flag in the hole. Some of them had like the big flag, but it just wouldn't come out. All of them had some sort of covering on the hole, so it would only be about an inch deep, so you don't have to reach your hand in. All of them had, missing rakes. All of them had missing ball washers, but some of them would require you to wear a mask the whole time. Some would require you to wear a mask when you're in the tee box or on the green. Some of them would not require you to wear a mask at all when you're out on the course. So it just, everyone was different. And that's why you get worried a little bit, because college football doesn't have that czar. You're going to get all these politicians, local, city, county, state, national, and commissioners for each different conference. I mean, there could be, that's just from golf courses in Southern California. What are the rules changes going to be like all over the place? I mean, I don't know. Like, it's going to be crazy.
Well, I know. I thought, and this probably isn't revealing anything that we're not supposed to reveal, but I've seen it a couple of other places, and then Mike Bohn didn't disagree that if you had to go in a direction of somebody to run college football from their perspective, or not exactly a czar, but somebody that would make the final call, everybody in the world likes and respects Bill Hancock, the executive director of the college football playoffs. And his is a name that people say, maybe if we need somebody like that, he'd be the guy to go to. He's universally respected, liked, trusted, a really good guy. But his name, you keep hearing it bounced around. They're not going to let the NCAA get control of college football, ever. Not anything. That would break up the NCAA if the NCAA tried to take over college football, and the powers are just not going to do it. They wouldn't let the NCAA have anything to do with the bowls. And then when the playoffs came, they said the same thing. We don't trust you. We don't want you taking it over like basketball, and you're not getting football. And so the NCAA, I know when people say, well, what does Mark Emmert think about it? Or what Mark Emmert, when he is asked, says, hey, that's not my call. We're not making any calls about the college football season. And the college football people aren't going to let him or the NCAA make those calls.
Well, Keely, should we jump into some questions?
Let's do it. This one's more of a comment, so maybe get your guys' thoughts on it. It's from Frank in Sacramento, who said, just watched Tunnel Vision with Brandon Sosna. That guy is a force. USC Athletics is in very good hands if we can keep him. He and Mike Bohn's philosophy of listen and learn explains why Clay Helton couldn't be fired right off the bat in December. Frank in Sacramento.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things there. I think even though there was the real potential that someone would underwrite Urban Meyer if they brought him in, I think there was a hesitation at all levels at USC just because of Urban Meyer, the force that he is and how strong he is, and was, with a brand new athletic director and a relatively new president and all of that, and with some questions about, Urban's situation at Florida and Ohio State. I don't think they wanted to deal with that. And then probably it looked like they looked into Clay's contract a little bit more and said, uh-oh. So I think it was a whole bunch of those things. I don't think that was a true decision exactly to keep Clay. I just think, it took 11 days, and I just think it wasn't exactly a decision. It was more of, we've got other things we can do. Do we want to, start here? So I would measure Bohn and Sosna based on everything that's been done since then. That ain't gonna fly with a lot of our posters on the P. They're not accepting that, because they're going to say, what about Clay? What about, how many times do we see that? What about Clay? But
does that come up on the board at all?
Yeah,
Dan?
I think I've heard of. I know it's gonna come
Yeah.
up. I'm just betting.
I was like, hey, I got tested for the coronavirus and I was negative, and they're like, well, what about Clay Helton? I was like, oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't go there for those two. I think they should be measured on everything since then. We'll never probably know all the things that happen to have Clay still be here, but I would measure them based on everything they've done since then, and it's been impressive. I mean, they look at everything and say, what could I like them. And especially with Brandon, he's really competitive, and we haven't seen. I mean, we've had great athletes as athletic directors, and there wasn't a hint of competitiveness. How do we do this? How do we dominate? And I don't think you can run a sports program if you don't have that competitive edge. And these guys are bringing a competitive edge. What can we do to be the best? I mean, no one would have even dreamed recently that you could go get the guys from LSU. You would say, oh, LSU, can't go there. They got too much money. That's too big a deal. And they went and got those guys at LSU. Or if somebody said, hey, let's go get the best recruiter from Oregon. A guy on the West Coast might be as good as anybody in the country. In years past, it would have been like, we have no shot at getting that guy to come here. And that happened. So I think that's how I would measure them, that they're out there competing to put together as good a staff, as I think it was humanly possible to pretty much put together, the way they've done it. And it's kind of proven out. And I think you never know what's going to happen. I mean, when they put that staff together, they didn't know there was going to be a pandemic that would shut everything down. And what's happened now, I don't know if you've seen the number. I think there are 600 commitments to major college football now. That's double. Last year at this time, there weren't 300. So people are committing earlier, maybe committing closer to home and all of that. And USC has a staff that's constituted in order to take advantage of that. If last year's staff were still in place, how many commitments would USC have? And would they be in the top 5?
No way.
That answers itself. I mean, just asking the question. But so by competing to get as good at guys as they could get and get them in here, you don't know what's going to happen. And now you got guys that are ready to take advantage of what was unforeseeable. I mean, so I'd measure Bohn and Sosna based on that. And the results that we're seeing. Now, will the results on the field, on practice and game day be as different from last year as the recruiting results are? I don't know. But the ability of Clay to work with these guys and let them recruit as differently as they're doing it from the past couple of years, does that say maybe this can also happen in practice and game plans and game day and all that? USC fans can only hope.
Yeah, Brandon was very impressive. I met him. He reached out to me. I met him right after the Holiday Bowl. He had flown out from Cincinnati, went to San Diego, came back, met me for lunch in Hermosa. I posted on the Peristyle how impressed I was with him. I got a lot of pushback, but after watching the interview with him, after watching some of the things that they've done, hitting some of those singles, He's just impressive. And I like the way you put it, Dan. I think this is a competitive group. Even though you had these elite athletes that were the athletic directors before, you just didn't feel like they were competitive about this stuff. They were never going to push the envelope. They were never going to try to, they were just kind of going along with whatever was going on there. This is what you get when you hire experienced people that have done this before. They have at least, maybe their philosophy isn't right. We don't know, but they have one. They've done things before, and they're going to have a game plan of what they want to do again. So we had a couple of voicemails. I'm going to get the voicemails. We did have one mentioned in the video stuff. I'll get to that in a second. But Dan, we got this on Tunnel Vision as well. Our buddy the Cattleman left like a 2-minute voicemail. Sorry, Cattleman, we can't talk about it. But really, he was harping on Mike Bohn tried to hire Butch Jones at Colorado, and he said he hired him at Cincinnati. We kind of went back and forth. Was he really there at Cincinnati when he hired him? But I guess he did. I didn't go back and look. I don't know if you did, Keely, but he was very successful at Cincinnati. He just didn't have a good run at Tennessee. So he also said that Mike Bohn was clueless, that people didn't realize that they wanted Clay Helton gone when he got there. Mike Bohn certainly realized that people wanted Clay Helton gone. He had a 3-week window to make a choice, and I think Dan talked about that. But I don't know if you want to address, because of your Cincinnati ties, the Butch Jones stuff.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I didn't like Butch Jones much at all, but he followed. I mean, here's the amazing thing about Cincinnati. The 2 previous coaches went on to, why can't I think of the guy's name at Michigan State? What's his?
Mike D'Antonio?
Mike D'Antonio, followed by Chip Kelly. So how good was USC or Cincinnati in those 2 hires? Now, they set things up in a way that Butch Jones could probably not fail right away, and he got out of town quick enough. Tennessee, dumb as they were, it was really a dumb hire for Tennessee to hire him away, because he was existing on what the 2 previous coaches had done, and they were so much better than anybody would have expect to have at Cincinnati. But I didn't. I wouldn't vouch for. I mean, I think he got his basketball coach hire right. I think he got the baseball coach hire right there. I think he got the football coach hire right after that. But yeah, I would not vouch for the Butch Jones hire. Butch sounded like a college football coach. He looked like one. He wasn't one. I mean, as he proved.
Yeah. I mean, he had a good record at Cincinnati. I'm not going to destroy Mike Bohn because of trying to hire him or hiring him or whatever.
No.
Keely, we do have a voicemail on the video, guys. Or would you rather go to a question? Do you have something similar?
No, it's fine. Go for it. I've been just trying to jump in. It's fine. Keep going.
Okay, here we go. Here's the question. Hopefully this comes through.
I don't understand why we had.
I think we got to start that again because I had it muted, so I will unmute it. Here we go.
Hey, podcast, got a question for you. I don't understand why we had to hire 2 video guys to proof up the program, making videos for the football team and the players. Why would we have to steal them from LSU? I mean, I understand for their part, they would like to get into the USC film program, and it makes sense for them, but we've got a whole film section of the school. Certainly there are 2 guys or 3 guys or a class that would love the opportunity to do things for the football program. And they could even grab a teacher and make them make it an assignment, each week to do something for the football team. I mean, they should be tied hand in hand. It would be a learning opportunity for the students. And, I just think it would benefit the football program, and it wouldn't cost as much. So anyway, just thought you thought about that. It just didn't make sense to me. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, real quick. I went on a rant on this on Tunnel Vision, Rick. This is exactly what's wrong with USC. Why go hire someone that's good at their job when you could hire someone who has never done it before, but they're already at USC? Isn't that better? No, it's not better. You get the best people in the business. They hire the best people in the business. It's that simple. Like, I don't get it.
I don't.
I can't resist this. When you say, why did you hire the guys at LSU? I still remember when they asked the famous bank robber, Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is. if you want to go out and get the best, you look around the country and you say, where are the best guys doing this? We need somebody to do this. And you go to LSU, and usually that's where it would stop, but it didn't stop. And the neat thing you found out about Jacob Brown is Will Stout, how much they wanted to be at LA, how much they wanted to be part of the film school and the environment here. And I mean, Will's still in school. I mean, so, he's getting a scholarship and getting paid, but it's not like you're having to hire, guys that you're having to pay, coordinator salaries to. They're young guys and loving being here. And I think USC, the environment at USC and the film school and everything else is improved immeasurably by bringing people in like that. They're going to bring something to USC. Hopefully, they can take interns and apprentices and all that from the film school. But
and they said as much. They said they wanted to do that. I mean, I already ranted about this. I don't understand why we've always talked about USC's Rolodex, how USC has to go out and get the best. That's what they did here. And honestly, can I be honest? I feel like it's insulting to the creative process. Like, these guys, they have to plan these videos. They have to search for narrators. They have to play. It takes time. And to have this be like a weekly assignment type of thing, it's not like that. It takes so much time, so much editing, footage that you have to log, you have to do. And to suggest that it's some willy-nilly thing is just wrong. And also, go back and watch when Ryan asked Dante Williams, the new cornerbacks coach, what these type of videos do for recruits and college athletes. They love these. Dante looked so excited that he has a clear asset to help him recruit for USC. So to me, this is kind of like a generational misunderstanding. And I hate to pull that card as a young person, quote unquote. But I just think that the people who don't get it don't understand where recruiting is now and how much effort and time it takes to make videos like this. That's it. Yeah. That's my Keely rant.
If you had any question about hiring these guys, all you had to do is watch the first hype video, and you would say, "Oh, wait, they do that?" I mean, I don't know how quickly they turned that thing around, but it's spectacular. I mean, everybody in the world that saw that went, holy criminy. I mean, you were seeing sportscasters and, alums and all that saying, whoa, that's great stuff. And, if you had a question before that, you saw that, you just say, I got no more questions now.
Yeah, completely. Plus, the first 3 seconds of that video was amazing because it was my voice. But then,
that was ridiculous.
But the way Keely put it is perfect. Dante Williams is like the ninja recruiter. He's the Pac-12 recruiter of the year. He's got his weapons, whatever he needs to do. He's got his ninja stars and his nunchucks and stuff. Well, then you're like, what? You hire these video guys. Now you gave him a bazooka too. So he can still do his ninja stuff, but if he needs to bazooka somebody, he can do that. There's like the Indiana Jones scene where that samurai guy's in front of Indiana Jones. He's just fought all these guys. He's wiping his brow. He just pulls out his gun and shoots them. It's a lot easier. You're bringing a gun to a sword fight, and that's what you're giving Dante Williams by giving him these video guys. So it's fine. Why? The students in the cinema school, I bet you half of them don't even know what the football team is. So that's a problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not like all these people were jonesing. There wasn't any connection between the cinema school. Now there will be. Now you'll be able to bring some of those guys in.
Well, and the other thing is, we do not ever need another. They're going to learn on the job hire ever for any position. Nothing can't do it.
Yep.
Sorry about that, Rick. But we just
sorry. We
had to give you a little crushing. That's all right. Yeah, and on video too. So man,
I know I was pretty very introvert.
It is kind of interesting when we play a voicemail. And we're listening, and you can see our expressions. What did he just say, or whatever?
Yeah, I gotta watch my reactions on video now. It's calling me out. Should we jump back into emails, Ryan?
Yeah, go
ahead. First off, it's from Stephen Poway. He says, "Dear Ryan, Dan, and Keely, are you aware of any petitions from USC or Pac-12 football players expressing their desire to play football this fall? I would assume that USC administrators will be tempted to forgo football this fall if they can't guarantee safety 100%. To get out ahead of this and to let their feelings known, I would expect players to band together and let the administration know how they feel. Steve and Poway.
I would doubt that players even are willing to admit that there's a chance that they're not going to play this year. I mean, I think to put together a petition might be giving that more credence than anybody wants to give it at this point in time. And I think the other thing I'll react to, and what Stephen said there, was one would hope that the standard is not we can protect you 100%. And it's like if there's one infection, we close everything down. That's not the real world. That's not how the real world works. I mean, there's risks in everything that we do, and you have to balance the risk and the reward. And I think too often, and we heard a sentiment last night on our call, where is if one person, and I don't know if if you lose one person, then is it worth it to have football at all? I think that's a false choice, and it's not how we do things. And I don't think we can ever guarantee that. I mean, if the question is, if anybody's going to come down sick as a result of this, we can't have football. We're never going to have football. We're not going to have USC. I mean, you can't do that. It's not going to happen. You got to have it under control. It's got to be, manageable. It's got to be able to be dealt with. You got to have the testing and all the therapeutics. But no one should ever be talking about we're going to be able to guarantee you 100% safety. You can't do that.
Yeah, life is not 100% safe. So
yeah, Adam Silver of the NBA said that almost word for word, I think yesterday, Dan. So. You're on the same page.
He's a smart guy. Okay.
He is. On a similar note, we actually got an email from Frank from Las Vegas who said, I've enjoyed discussion on USCfootball.com about the different scenarios for this fall, depending on what the politicians decide is best for everyone. Keep up the good work. I have related questions for Keely and Dan. If a football player on the team that USC is scheduled to play the next weekend tests positive for the coronavirus, does the entire team get quarantined, enroll ineligible to play, forfeiting the game to USC, or is the game canceled? Thanks for keeping us up to date with what's going on at USC in the Pac-12. Stay safe and fight on. Frank from Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you have to have a lot of, the ability to test quickly and test everybody. But I think everybody that's, test positive, test negative, I guess would be the way to do it, is allowed to play. And if you test positive, you're not. And I don't know that in this environment, you're going to be able to quarantine whole groups of people, for 2 weeks. It's not possible to do that. And, obviously you have to have other things in place. For example, I mean, the therapeutics that has to happen is, if you test somebody, you can immediately put them on something that will pretty much guarantee that they won't get really, really sick. If you can do that and short circuit it there, but you got to be able to test everybody so that whenever that happens, you quarantine them and you get them immediate treatment. And we can't do that yet. I mean, we're going to need to be able to do that to open up USC. We're going to need to be able to do that to open up football. But I don't know that you can anymore quarantine everybody if somebody has a negative test. I just don't think that's if that's the standard, then you really shouldn't start the season, because that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think you could have one person test positive, because then you can monitor the other people. They can get tested and make sure other people are safe. But if like the whole offensive line gets sick, then I don't think you can play. Something like that happens. So, it's just one of those things. It's uncertain right now. But I don't I agree. I don't think one person tests positive cancel the whole season for everybody. I just don't think that could be the case. So.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go into the season understanding that's not going to be the case. And again, that's just one more of those many, many decisions that we have to come up with. And here's the answer that we all agree on.
Yeah. We had a couple of voicemails. So Joan, we love Joan. It was a little over 2 minutes long. And now that we're doing the video stuff, I don't think we can play it because it's just hard to sit here for 2 minutes and listen to the voicemail. But she'd enjoyed the Brandon Sosna interview. So thank you for that, Joan. But also didn't understand how people were upset about the the video hires. And I didn't expect it to be that polarizing, but I would get texts from people like, why are they hyping this up? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world, but I certainly wouldn't be mad at it. It seems like it's a pretty big deal. But yeah, that's weird. But thank you, Joan, for that. We also, like our buddy Curtis, I think maybe this is probably my fault because I did a whole voicemail show with Harvey Hyde and Curtis, and he called about 10 more times this week. Curtis, keep it to one time a week if we can. If you want to do one for this show, one for Harvey Hyde, but just not like an update every day because it's just, I can't go through them all and stuff. But his basic thing is a little trash talk to Alabama, saying that they lost their strength coach, and that's a big deal. He also wanted Alabama fans to look up Gary Bryant, who's coming off the USC bench, the incoming freshman wide receiver. So Curtis is pretty confident heading into the Alabama game. And it's funny, Dan, on Tunnel Vision, we had an Alabama guy call and was like, are all USC fans like super stoked and think they're going to crush Alabama? I'm like, no, but there's one that is, and that's Curtis.
Yeah, I wouldn't call out Alabama even a little bit. I mean,
No.
If you were there for the entrance of the USC team in the 52-6 game, you would never even think that thought. I mean, if you haven't done anything to just, if that would have been the 2004, 2005, 2003, 4, 5 USC team, 2008 team, they could have come on like that, but they wouldn't have. And they didn't need to. They were going to show you when the game got here. That's why I would just, nice and quiet, and you try to get to that point, and then you say, we'll celebrate afterwards if we do the right thing here. But I don't think anybody needs to be doing. And one of the things with Alabama, they don't do a lot of trash talking that I recall. I think they just show up and play, and I kind of like that. I don't think Nick would let them do a lot of trash talking, but I don't think USC's not in a position to do any kind of trash talking about anything at this point in time. It's just it's off there's no point to it. I mean, and it just makes it makes USC people who do that look a little like, come on, wait till you've done something and then you can do it. But if you do it now, all you do is probably make yourself look, and then maybe you'll be able to come back and say, see, I was right. Just say it quietly. Say, I think we got a chance. We're better than people give us credit for. But I don't think you got to be tooting your own horn at this point for USC. I mean, you just can't.
Yeah. And I got one more, Keely, unless you had a thought on that.
No, I was just going to say that the caller on Tunnel Vision specifically called from Tuscaloosa about Curtis from Moreno Valley. So he was just like, can I get an explanation, please? So
yeah,
I thought that was...
it is interesting that people, I know, Keely, we were going into the Notre Dame game, was it a couple of years ago? And the guy was checking us in. I don't know if you were with me or not. Was a big Notre Dame fan from Maine, and he had been listening to the podcast, and I was like, he had his blue and gold on, a really cool guy. But he said, you guys said something on the podcast. I'm thinking, boy, and I guess, if people are going to play somebody, they maybe start listening to, what you're saying about them or whatever. But it is surprising how those guys turn up and you think, they're listening.
Yeah.
Right. I think Notre Dame is the one that I've gotten so many times. People go, "Hey, I watched you and that guy on Instant Analysis," and I'm like, "Thanks, I appreciate it."
Yeah.
And those were Notre Dame fans.
Yeah.
I mean, South Bend. So yeah, they pay attention.
We have a regular. Coley's a regular on Tunnel Vision. He's a Notre Dame fan. He's on every show we do. He's on my lunches. He's on all of it. One last thing, Rick from Vista. We already played a voicemail from him where we kind of crushed him a little bit. Sorry about that, Rick. But he'd called multiple times too. And this one is a little simpler. We can discuss. I think we talked about how much lead time would you need to get into the season, and some of the coaches on the Pac-12 thing were talking about it. And I've heard the low of like you need at least a month. 6 weeks seems to be sort of the consensus. They would like more than that. And then that's kind of with coming in, but they would like to have some time with the strength coaches even before that. But probably 6 weeks is the one that's been thrown around the most, Dan.
Yeah, I think Mike said the other night, I was surprised. He said that he'd heard somebody who said 5, but I think more than not, they want 8. And we're guessing that 6 is the compromise. 6 seems to be the NCAA favored position of the NCAA medical and training committee is give them 2 weeks of strength and conditioning in July, and then 4 weeks of preseason in August. Is if you had to guess, that's probably the direction it'll go. Although maybe they'll give them an extra week of strength and conditioning in July, but I think it's going to be about that number. I'd be surprised if it's less than 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Something we talked about on the Family Feud podcast that I want to get your guys' thoughts on is I think that this time period will really determine who's a self-starter and who quote unquote wants it. Because, I mean, you could get to, say they start up in July. Could the depth chart weed itself out just based on who stayed in shape this whole time? I mean, because it'll be interesting to see what happens to the players' bodies just in the sense that they haven't had this much time off of playing in maybe their whole lives.
I think it's a really good question. And college football is now more like it used to be, where if you can go back far enough, you can find before they thought weight training was it would make you muscle bound and don't do it, and that's in the 60s.
Wasn't it Nebraska, Dan? Nebraska had like the first strength coach, I think, and they changed the way. Yeah,
they did a lot of things at Nebraska that weren't just lifting weights. But I stopped in there once on the summer heading out west, and they had like 150 guys working out, and 75 of them were on scholarship, and 75 of them were on a program where they were the first school in America to figure out that you could bring in ADD kids and kids that didn't test well and all that. And they developed a special program for those kids, and they got every one of those kids that didn't test well in the whole country. So they had like 2 football teams working out. I mean, they were so far ahead of the game in so many ways, but the strength program was something that they did, better than anybody. They were way ahead of their time, and it showed for a while. I mean, they eventually couldn't recruit the kids from California and the East Coast like they had been able to, but when they could do that, they were awfully good. But I think what you'll see is, for example, if you look back at the history of USC and look at guys like Marcus Allen or O.J. Simpson or whatever, I mean, USC hasn't had players that strong and that fast and that in shape, no matter how many days you weightlift, how long, during the year you work with these kids. So those guys, a guy like Marcus Allen a lot of that was doing it himself, and he just wanted it so badly, and he showed up, so ready to develop himself. And I just looked at those 2 guys as an example of, that's 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And yet USC hasn't had anybody walk through the door even looking like those 2 guys. OJ was 210 pounds, and he was had a world record, 400 or I guess 440 yard dash, part of the record, world record team. And Marcus just could do anything. And so a lot of that was just guys doing it on their own and, being really, really good. I mean, what somebody said, the first weight thing they saw at USC was like 1 bench and, 1 set of weights somewhere in the basement of what's the
physical gym.
Yeah. And they said, that was it. And those are teams that are winning national championships and really, really, and those are guys that did a lot of that on their own. So it'll be interesting to see who goes back to that place, Keely. I think we'll find out a lot, because kids nowadays, you're right, they've been, coached up and supervised since grade school their whole lives and almost no time off. And now we'll see who's the self-starter, as you say. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see for sure. So we have an email from our buddy class of 1962. He says, "Hi, Dan, Ryan, and Keely. Pete Carroll was not only a great coach and face of the football program at USC, but he also embraced the South Central community in Los Angeles with his anti-gang effort. Even after leaving for Seattle, he still championed the program to help young people in Los Angeles. Is Clay Helton doing any community outreach programs or working with high schools in the area around USC's campus? As someone who worked in Los Angeles schools for many years, I greatly appreciated the work that Pete did for all young students, not just athletes. Fight on and win, Dan, class of 1962. P.S. After hearing Ryan's interview with Vic Soto, it appears that he has the same community spirit that Pete had.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Pete was, centered on, South Central. I think Clay's is more. I know. There was a get together in Orange County, and it was for. I think it was some kind of an outreach to mothers and children. I think Clay's wife was really involved, or is really involved in something like that. But it's going in maybe a different area, say, than the gang, kind of the anti-gang program that Pete was involved in. And it might be a little bit of a different time too. I don't know that we kind of have the same sense of maybe the same kind of gang activity. I don't know enough about that, but I get the feeling that there's a little bit of a different, outreach in different areas. Although I think USC does a pretty good job in general as a community in terms of outreach to the neighborhood. I don't think there's any question about that. But Pete had a one of a kind ability to go, interact and talk to gang guys. I mean, he just did. There's no question about it. That was something special.
Yeah, the Better LA, I think, was the charity that he. But even it was still running. I don't know if it's still going, but he did. I know when he left for Seattle. So, but I don't know specifically what. Like we saw Clay Helton at the Juju Smith-Schuster Foundation. He was the biggest donor, I think, there or something. Or he bought some package. It was like $5,000. I mean, he was contributing to that stuff. I don't know if I'd have to ask what specific, there's one program he's specifically involved with more.
I know that his wife,
right.
Angela, she's involved with, it's called My Friend's Place. It's basically a homeless, they help homeless youth get out of the streets and whatnot.
Okay.
It's based in Hollywood. I pass by it a lot. That's how I know. But I know that Angela has been doing a lot of charity work. And if you pay attention, USC has their own outreach Twitter account, and you can see they retweet a lot. A lot of the football players do certain events with Angela and whatnot. So, and Clay will show up too, but I know that his wife has a huge presence as far as community outreach and whatnot.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about, because I know they had an event in Orange County, and it got a lot of attention, and she does a great job.
Mm-hmm. We have one final email, and it's actually the last of the series. We've been doing the big issues. Jim sent you the big issues questions, and so it's the final one. And so he says, if selected members of the Pac-12 merge with another conference, which programs will be ranked as the most attractive behind USC?
Okay,
I think it would depend on which conference. You would only think maybe that the Big 12 is the only way probably they could go. So does that make, say, Arizona State more attractive because of geography and having Phoenix, as opposed to, say, Oregon as because of the national, Oregon is Oregon, the Oregon brand, and what they've been doing lately. I mean, you would think also Washington would have a lot of appeal. Excuse me. I'm not sure if UCLA would, just because you get just as much impact in Los Angeles with one school as two. So if you were the Big 12 and you said, whoa, this is great, we're going to be able to put Texas and California together, you don't need two schools in LA. You just need USC. Do you need a Northern California school? Stanford is such a different place in terms of how the fans support it there. And then Cal is Cal. So other than USC, I would think Arizona State might be the most attractive if you were trying to bring two into the Big 12 to actually make them 12. They've only got 10 schools now. But that would probably be my guess, would be to go with Arizona State if you were going to pair USC with somebody.
That's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways this could go, Jim, and thanks for all the interesting questions we talked about the last few weeks. I do think that, the geographic pairings in the Pac-12, if you're talking about we're going to expand, majorly because we want to blow out and have 16, 16 team power conferences, I could see pairs sort of getting picked off where maybe USC and UCLA and Arizona State go to the Big 12 or something. There's still the appeal. I think with a Washington and an Oregon, if you're talking about leaving, those would probably could potentially come as a pair. It would have to be sort of like Big 12-y, what you do with, West Virginia, where you're kind of reaching outside of the zone. But if it's something where they're going to, put some big conferences together, I think those are possibilities. Or it's some kind of power play. Could USC play in the SEC or something, where you get to like they grab USC and Oregon or something? I don't know. Like something like that would be kind of interesting. And it might just be, what if USC and UCLA went to the Big 12? Then there's like kind of a yard sale to get, we'll bring in Arizona State, and the Big 10 gets Washington and Oregon. I don't know. I mean, I think those schools probably have the most appeal. It's hard to see like a Washington State and and Oregon State, just the remoteness, even when you're on the West Coast, that's tough. The Cal Stanford thing, just not bringing a whole lot of fanfare and stuff to the table. Those are tougher too. Utah's come on strong. Colorado was in the Big 12. I don't want to leave those schools out. I mean, I think those would have to be part of a bigger expansion, but the ones at the top, I think, USC is the one up there. But like Dan said, the Arizona schools might have, they bring something to the table too, the Phoenix area and everything. And then, power in the Northwest with Washington and Oregon. It's just tough geographically to pair them up with other people. But I think there's a lot of options,
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Big 12 and you got a lot of small college towns and you've got the Dallas-Fort Worth area and not much else in terms of big TV markets, by adding LA and Phoenix, you add the number 2 TV market and the number 5, 6, whatever Phoenix is. It's in the top 7 for sure. I think, Jim, the thing I'm looking at as the long-range play here is what, and I first was suggested by Stuart Mandel, the Athletic, and that the next big thing that's going to happen in college athletics and conferences is there will be a superpower college football conference, a national conference mimicking the NFL with either 24 or 32 teams. And you will take, probably 8 or 9 from the SEC and maybe 5 or 6 from the Pac-12 and the other conferences in between. And they won't be for all sports, just for football. And you'd have a playoff structure similar to the NFL, and you'd schedule similar to the NFL with the schools geographically, and then some crossover and all of that. But if I had to guess what's going to happen in 10 or so years, I think there's more of a chance of that. The money would be unbelievable if they went that direction. If you had a national super college football conference, and again, the difficulty would be when you're getting down to number 28, 29, 30, whatever, and those, who do you pick? Because you'd have, do you pick Arizona State or do you pick, whatever? But USC obviously would be in there. UCLA, who knows? Where they would be. But apparently Stewart did the money thing, and it looks like they'd be well over $100 million per team per year if they went this direction.
Wow.
And got an NFL, that they would be able to get an NFL type TV contract. And so I would think money does talk eventually. So we'll see where that goes. But I think that will be probably the next development in college conference reshuffling.
I do like that. I'll have to go check out Stewart's article on that.
Yeah.
But so if you're Oregon and Washington, if it's just adding teams to a conference, that's tougher. If it's the top 32 programs, that's easier. You're in. So that's a good thing. If you're Oregon and Washington, that's good. For USC, you're in no matter what. Like, you're valuable. People want you. The other thing, though, Dan, and I am not a soccer fan, but my favorite thing about soccer, and Keely, you know where I'm going, relegation. So if it's really this $100 million thing, and you let Arizona State in or whoever, I don't know what the cutoff would be, but say you're near the bottom. I don't know if you're Baylor or something, and and you like don't win a game, boom, you're out. Arizona State, you're in or something, and then Arizona State's getting the big money, and they moved up the I think that would be amazeballs.
Well, it would pretty much impact who do you hire as your next athletic director or your next head football coach if the relegation grabs you by the ankles and pulls you down, and there goes $100 million, and you're now playing Washington State and Oregon State in the whatever they call that league. I think people would. That would be a really how that would change college football. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I mean, could you even argue amateurism at that point? I feel like you couldn't.
Maybe. Although, I mean, right now college football is still a gigantic,
it's still a huge business.
Generating gigantic.
Yeah,
dollars.
But
it's just right now they all go to the coaches. But this would generate a lot more dollars just because the TV money would be ridiculous. And the amount of TV money that Oregon State and Washington State say would get in this scenario would not probably be $32 million a year. They would go down more like the group of five where you're getting a couple of million. So that money would come out of, the bottom half of the big conferences at this point. But, that would be an amazing. I think TV is going to demand it fairly soon and say, look, if we want nothing but good games and nothing but games that matter and nothing but games that'll get people watching from everywhere. And in a lot of ways, that'll help the top Pac-12 teams. It ain't going to help the bottom ones at all. And where the SEC might get 9 of their 14 in or 10 of their 14. And Pac-12 would get, 5, something like that. But
what's your schedule look like this year? Well, it's mediocre. USC plays Oregon, Washington, Texas A&M, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, and Michigan. You're like, oh, okay, that's good. Like what?
yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, you wouldn't have any buys, and with the NFL, there are teams that just aren't cutting it, and you can kind of maybe take the week off a little bit, but the TV people would love this. I mean, it's just a whole new way of looking at things. But I do think, to me, that's the next step in college football.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I love it. This is good. I have to go find that article right after this.
He wrote it a couple of years ago, and then he's updated it. But it's stuck in my head that this is by far the most sensible way this is going to go. How long does USC want to be sharing equally with Oregon State and Washington State when you consider how much more expensive it is to run a program in LA compared to those places? And yet, and who brings how much to the table? I just don't think that's going to keep flying. It just, I don't see it.
I interviewed him a little bit for my NIL story. NIL would be majorly impacted by this too. Like, would you rather get your name, image, and likeness would be worth a lot more if you're in the Power 32 as opposed to the Group of 32 or whatever. Like if you're, hey, I want to go, you're in the top group, then you're gonna get all that money. But maybe we'll have him on the podcast and talk about it sometime. That would be fun. I don't know if he broke down the schools that would make it or
he did. I think he did. Yeah, I think he gave you, I think, both a 24 team and a 32 team if you went this way. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to talk about. I mean, to say the least. It's just, so
nice.
Much cool stuff. But yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening or watching. Hopefully this works. We're trying the little simulcast for the first time. Keely's a little pixelated now, so we got to get her some.
I gotta say, my roommate was having like a Zoom conference call video thing while this was happening, so I was trying to hear you guys while you were cutting out. So I did my best.
Well, it sounded like we could hear you. Okay, I think we sounded all right, but hopefully there weren't any issues there. And please, make sure we're doing this big push. If you have any Apple products that you can get podcasts on. Subscribe to the Peristyle Podcast on your podcasting app. Keely, I forgot. We might have had a couple reviews. We could.
We do if we want to shout them out.
Shout out. Yeah, we want to give you some shout outs if you leave us some good reviews. It really helps to grow the show. We've been around the longest. We've been doing this forever, but we want to kind of build up those reviews a little bit. That's something we mention, but it really does help us. So if you have a minute, please do.
Yeah, so Bala fan said, simply the best. The crew that works this podcast are simply the best when it comes to USC football. Some of the most trusted names in the community. Any USC fan should be listening. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
G. Harry said, the podcast is amazing. Great job on the content and guest list. This is one of my favorite podcasts that's on constant rotation. Ed from Marina Valley said, great insights and guests that keep us up to date. Fight on. J.R. Newsom said, I really enjoy listening to the podcast. It's great analysis and guests, even if it's too amicable to certain USC employees. So we get some mixed reviews, but he gave it 5 stars, so we'll take it.
Yeah.
So a lot of 5 stars. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it.
We really do. Thanks for that. And if you spend a minute and if you want to put a question on there, we can we'll make sure those bump to the top. If you have a 5-star question from the Apple Podcast reviews, we'd love to do that. But wherever you listen to the podcast, if some people are just on their desktop computer playing it there, but if you have whatever your smartphone is, there's probably some kind of podcasting app. Or if it's an Android phone, Google Podcast I like to use, but Stitcher or TuneIn, all those different applications you can get the podcast on. So please subscribe. We love when you listen. We love when you write in, call in. We'll love when you leave reviews. So we do appreciate that. We'll wrap it up. That is Dan Weber sitting there. Keely, you're sitting there, and I'm sitting here. We're still trying to be safe, not in the same room and everything. So hopefully you guys are too. We are very hopeful that we will have some sort of college football this fall. We want it to happen. So we're doing what we can to make it happen. But in the meantime, we'll just keep coming at you the way we've been talking about the Trojans. So for Dan, Keely, I'm Ryan. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you next time.